Hey guys, so today it is snowy and it is cold, so I thought that would be the perfect time to sit down and share with you some of my favorite books to read around this time of year. I am calling it holiday/winter reads, but I know a lot of people don't celebrate Christmas. It's not even that big of a deal in my house, but most of these books classify more into the winter and that you can read them like January, but some of them do have like holiday themes, so they are included in this list, but just minimally. These are some of my favorite books to read around this time of year, like I said, and I think you would enjoy them curled up in front of the fireplace, drinking a hot chocolate on a day like today, at least where I live. So yeah, I've got 8 books here to show you, so let's get right in. The first one should be obvious, and that is Dash and Lily's Book of Dares by Rachel Kahn and David Levithan. I have read this book twice already and have loved it just as much each time I've read it through. In this novel, we follow 2 characters, Dash and Lily, and they meet over a notebook that was left in a bookstore, leaving clues of kind of how to find each other, and they go on this adventure trying to like figure out the riddles, and they eventually meet up in person where we watch the relationship develop from there. So I think this is a perfect book for this time of year because it is Christmas, it is set in New York, and it is about 2 teens that develop a relationship over a bookstore. And I don't know about you, but that's like everything that I'm about. So yeah, one of my favorite reads. David Levithan is one of my favorite authors, and he continues to surprise me with his writing, and he does more than just cliche love stories. So if you haven't read his yet, I would definitely recommend checking this out. The next one is The Astrologist by Christina Springer. This is a perfect one-day read as it is light and quirky and less than 200 pages, so you can sit down and read it straight through. In this novel, we follow a girl named Jane who works as a barista at her local coffee shop. And she has this theory that you can tell a lot about a person based on what coffee they order. So she has turned this theory into what she calls espressology, and she uses it to kind of play matchmaker on her friends and her customers. So the plot just flows from there, the good and the bad, and like I said, it was just light and quirky, and it is such a fun read for the winter and just makes you want to curl up with a hot drink and gush. So totally recommend. My True Love Gave to Me, edited by Stephanie Perkins. This is a young adult anthology collecting 12 different stories set around the holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, and New Year, or just winter in general. So overall, this novel was a meh for me. I did give it 3 out of 5 stars, but there were some stories in it that I loved and would reread just those stories specifically. I think this is a perfect read for the winter, especially like this time of year going into the new year, as you can read like 1 or 2 of the stories a day, just to like break up all of the other readings as we're reaching the end of the year and the reading challenge through Goodreads. I just think it's some light stories, and some of the authors included in this are David Levithan, Holly Black, Laini Taylor, Rainbow Rowell, and of course Stephanie Perkins. So they are some really big young adult authors that I think this is a pretty well-known novel. But if you haven't read it, it's a good time of year to check it out. So now we get into the ones that are definitely like less winter, but I think are good to read at this time of year just because they're like heavier, darker stories. And the first one is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. So when I first read this, I read this at the beginning of January. I don't remember what year, but I think it's perfect to read in the winter because it has such a dark atmosphere to it that it fits with like the days being shorter and it get darker so much earlier. But it is a middle grade with just a really dark plot. But there's pictures, so it's still, I don't want to say light, but it's a quick read and it's a very powerful read, and it is one of my favorite books that I will probably reread very, very soon. I know this was really hyped this year because of the movie release, but I had to mention it because it is one of my favorite books. Conversion by Katherine Howe. This is one that I read a few years ago, but I'm still quick to recommend. In this novel, we follow 2 parallel stories set over present day and 17th century. So in the present day story, we follow a girl named Colleen who is going to this academy with all these other fancy-ish girls, and one by one they start falling suddenly ill. And then the parallel story is set in the 17th century for the Salem witch trials. So it is kind of like a young adult historical fiction, but also thriller, tying these 2 stories together. And if it is a curse that is leading these girls to be sick, or what's going on, and I really, really enjoyed it. It isn't one that is widely talked about, and it does have mixed reviews, but I think if you go into it kind of open-minded, it will really surprise you. So It's, again, dark and it's a little on the thicker side, so I think it's perfect to read. I recommend Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I recommend this book in general, especially if you aren't a huge sci-fi person, which I wasn't. This one really got me into the genre. And it is set in so many different types of medias and like conversations and just different pictures and files and emails, and yeah, so it was a great transition into it. And even though it's like 600 pages, it doesn't read like that. But because it is sci-fi and it is a little bit of a heavier plot compared to like contemporary, it is such a good winter read. I was curled up with a blanket and I think a tea, and I just flew through this. It is kind of angsty being young adult, which keeps it a little bit light at times, but I don't know. I know this one is already pretty hyped, and the third book is coming out in March, which I'm so excited about. But yeah, if you wanted to read this book before I hit myself in the face with it, I think that the winter would be a really good time to pick it up. In case you just prefer to stick with contemporary, I did pick one that I think fits winter, and that is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. This is one of her darker novels, and although it is still problematic in some ways, I did really enjoy it. I liked some of the background stories, not necessarily how they were dealt with, but I don't know. In this novel, we followed Tate and Miles, and they meet coincidentally, and the relationship kind of goes from strangers to like a friends with benefits situation, but they both have very, very dark pasts, and it is a very rough contemporary. It is more new adult for sure, just because of like the sex and the language and stuff, but like I said, I really did enjoy this novel. I have lent it out to a few different people and it made me cry, so it's definitely not a summer read, and that's why I think it'd be good to read on a dark, gloomy, snowy day. And then the last book that I'm going to recommend for a gloomy, snowy day is Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick. So he has written quite a few other novels, but this one is one of my favorites and is the one that has stuck with me the most. So this is a middle grade novel written along his other format, in that half of it is told in pictures and half of it is told through written story. And this one follows two people, Ben and Rose, and just how their stories intertwine through these two different medias. It was just so good, and I don't want to say too much about it because it is like a middle grade and it's light and it's a quick read because half of it is told in pictures, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it is kind of reminiscent of A Monster Calls in that it is darker but impactful, and I think it is something that a lot of people should read. So that is one that I totally recommend. So yeah, those are all of the 8 books that I would recommend you read this winter season. I might do a winter TBR, but my December TBR isn't going too well, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Make sure if you've read any of the books that I talked about, you let me know what you thought of them or which ones you would recommend to read this season. I'm always looking for new books to add to my shelf. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.